Sah My Dudes SaiyanSalamander here, and welcome to my Fire Emblem Heroes new weapon type wishlist. We haven't had a proper new weapon type added into Fae since about 2 years ago when beast units were added. We've had colourless mages since then, but I think it's time we get a proper new weapon type added to the game. If you watch my Brave wishlist, I already mentioned a new weapon type which I'd really love to see added into the game really soon. But I'll get into that weapon type later on in the video, since it's actually my number one pick. I had to get a bit creative with weapons here since there's only really one weapon type featured in Fire Emblem that hasn't been added to Fae yet. So the rest of these weapons are completely new additions to the series. So let's kick off with my number 5 pick, shields. While some of these new weapon types were fairly easy to come up with, it was fairly hard coming up with new weapons for the lower end of this list. And I figured, hey, shields are items that have appeared in the Fire Emblem series, why not just turn them into weapons? And to anyone that says, how's someone supposed to fight with a shield? Have you ever watched or read Captain America or Rise of a Shield Hero? They can just yeet it if they have DC attached to it, or just go for a shield bash and ram their enemies. Shield units would probably be one range units that can be any colour. I was considering making them colourless exclusive though, since then we'd have 4 melee types of each colour: sword, lance, axe, and now shields. However, I decided against it for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to give them a unique effect like dagger units and dragon units. And second off, we have 7 weapon types for each colour currently, and adding a new colourless exclusive class would throw off a balance here. It'd only really work in keeping the balance if we end up getting coloured staffs one day, and I don't really see the point of expanding colour options for stave units in all honesty. For the exclusive effect, like the smoke effect of daggers or the adaptive damage effect of dragons, I decided to give them a Caduceus staff effect, except instead of reducing the damage for their allies by 30%, it reduces damage against themselves by 30%. It makes sense since, you know, they're shields, they're made to block attacks and lessen damage. So I figured an inbuilt damage reduction skill works really well for this weapon type. I think it's really interesting making a more defensive based weapon like this. And while it's at the bottom of my list, I'd really like to see this weapon added in the future someday, whether it's in Fae or in the mainline games. Next up is a bit of a wacky one to be honest, and out of all these weapon types, I think it has the least chance of being added into the game, since it might be a tad bit too complicated for a mobile game, which tries to simplify the franchise a bit more. And this unit type is Summoners and Puppeteers. I'm sure you've all played fighting games before with some sort of character like this. Rosalina and Luma from Smash Bros, Sasori from Naruto, etc. And I know Fire Emblem isn't a fighting game, but I think it's a really interesting idea to have a sort of master unit who's pretty frail and some sort of puppet or summon, which they command and they can power up. Maybe the main unit is very weak and effectively gets one-shot by anyone, but it has a summon or puppet that the unit boosts, and depending on how close they are to the unit, you get a bit more of a boost. So you could separate the puppet unit from the main unit, and it'll have weakened stats, but you'll be safer overall. But if you're closer to the puppet unit, you boost their stats by a lot more, but you're more at risk of dying because of how weak the main summoner puppeteer unit is. So it makes for a very high risk, high reward character. I'm thinking if a main unit dies, then the puppet dies too. But if a summon or puppet unit dies, then they revive at the start of the next turn. Although their BST is lowered as a compromise, which makes them really unique compared to other weapon types. I'm thinking there'll be 2 different types of this class. Summoners where the main unit deals magical damage, and with Puppeteers where they deal with physical damage. As for Puppeteer units or summoned units, they're effectively their own unit, so their kit would be dependent on the character that you summon. Like I said though, this is really unrealistic, which is why it's so far down the list. But while I was struggling to find out new weapon types, I thought this was an interesting idea, so I thought I'd mention it in the video. I think the closest we'll end up getting to this is probably just a cavalry dagger unit based on the mechanics in Fire Emblem Fates, since they were basically puppet users apart from that they just use bows and shurikens instead of whatever the fuck I've been explaining the last few minutes. Kicking off the top 3 now, we've got whips. Honestly, I only really thought of this idea because there's a certain character I wanted to talk about in my Outram Heroes series, so I thought I'd design whips in Fae so I could talk about that character in the future. I couldn't settle on one effect, so I thought it'd be interesting for each colour to have a different effect. So yeah, the way I designed whips, they can be red, blue, green, or colourless. They also hit foes from 2 spaces away. To start with, red whip users always have drag back and an incomplete witchy wand effect built into their weapon. So characters who use red whips will drag the enemy towards them and reset the enemy's special cooldown after they attack. Blue whip users have a similar effect, except instead of drag back, they have knockback instead. I figured with whips, the force could knock you back, or they could be used to tie you up, which is why I wanted to include drag back for one colour and knockback for another. Green whip users have a poison strike effect included in their weapon, and even inflict deep wounds on the foe they attack too. meaning the damage they deal is made sure to last. Finally, we've got colourless whips. They have an inbuilt savage blow effect. I spent so long trying to think of a secondary ability for this one, but it's hard trying to balance it out compared to the other coloured units. So I just kept the savage blow effect and made it a little bit more powerful than your typical savage blow, like savage blow 4 or 5. If you have any other ideas for how whips could work in Fire Emblem, then please let me know though, since I'm down to hear your ideas. Somehow whips were even harder to come up with than the last 2 weapons I talked about, so I'd love to hear some more ideas of how they could work. I may rework them again in another time, but for now this is all I can think of for it. The next series of weapons is something I really thought we'd get with the latest book we received in Fae, since it fits the theme of science and magic really well, and that weapon is guns. Much like how I made whips, guns have a range of 2, and have different effect depending on what colour the unit is due to how many types of guns there are. Red guns units are rapid fire weapons, so they've got a desperation effect built into them. Blue ones are like snipers, so their unique aspect is they initiate combat from 3 spaces away instead of 2. Green gun weapons are close range weapons that are like colourless whips, and also have a savage blow effect in the weapon too. And finally, colourless weapons are like dual wielding guns, so they either have a brave or a ninja effect built into them. Thankfully guns were pretty easy to think of, and while I don't think they'd work the same way as I theorycraft them, I can definitely see them added in the future. I mean, just look at Reagan, she already shoots bullets from a mech. I really thought they would introduce the Summoner as our first Fire Emblem gunslinger, but unfortunately we ended up getting them as a colourless mage, as a Mjolnir Strike exclusive instead. So I don't think we'll get them anytime soon, since I think they would have just made the Summoner that unit type if they'd planned on it. But I'm hoping we'll at least see them at some point in the future. And to the final weapon that I'll be talking about in this video, and it's one that I already mentioned last month in my Choose Your Legend Picks and Wishlist video. My number 1 most wanted weapon, as well as my favourite weapon type across the entire franchise, is Brawling. Unlike the other weapons on this list, the Brawling line of weapons have actually already appeared in the Fire Emblem series, since it appeared and debuted in Fire Emblem Three Houses, so they'd be pretty easy to design in Fae. All I did was make them any colour like all the weapons on this list, made them attack foes adjacent to them, and give them an inbuilt brave effect. They even don't have that pesky minus speed penalty, or any penalty for that matter, like most brave weapons, other than having a slightly lower base power in comparison. I actually considered having a different effect per gauntlet colour, like one being a standard brave effect, one being dual phased, one being ninja based, and finally the last one having an effect called strong hit. It basically meant instead of hitting twice, it would combine the damage from both attacks and hit once instead. But I figured I shouldn't overcomplicate it and just add the standard brave effect. Which would you prefer though? Would you prefer a different gauntlet effect for each colour, or would you like the more simpler approach I ended up choosing, where it's a simple brave effect for everyone without the minus speed penalty? I'll actually be releasing another video tomorrow, where I theorycraft some brawling heroes and make a whole banner and grand hero battle unit, filled with completely with gauntlet wielding heroes, so definitely make sure to keep an eye out for that when that video drops. That's all for this video, so I really hope you enjoyed, my dudes. If you did, please drop a like, subscribe so you don't miss out on my brawler theorycrafting video tomorrow, and more videos that I upload on the channel, and comment on what weapon type you'd like to see added the most into Fae. If you want to catch some more of my content live, then check out my Twitch channel in the description, where I play through a bunch of games like The World Ends With You, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and more. I also have a Discord channel linked in the description, so if you want to hang out more with the Salamander squad and talk about Fae, anime, and other random stuff, then please check out the server. Again, thanks for watching the video, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for the follow-up Brawler unit video. Until next time, my dudes, bye.